Hello everyone, you're welcome to another episode of Talk Sessions with Chichi. Okay, so today we'll be talking about escaping the corruption in this world. Okay, so before we get into today's teaching, let's go on a short break. I'll be right back. You're welcome back. So we'll be reading from Second Kings chapter 21 and verse 9. That's like our main text today. But before we get into it, I want us to read from verse 1. Okay, so we can understand, the whole events that led to verse 9. Okay, now I understand that might be like a pretty long read, okay, but we don't have a choice, okay, because every verse in the Bible matters, like I said last week. Okay, so and skipping context can lead to misinterpretation. And what's more is that misinterpretation can lead to misapplication. And that's dangerous, okay, because the effects are not just personal, they are ripple effects that can weaken conviction, okay, cause confusion, and even open doors for the devil to take advantage of. So every verse in the Bible matters, okay? I cannot just overemphasize this. Bible study requires diligence, not just to read, but to understand the full narrative, okay? So let's dive in and get into Second Kings chapter 21 and verse number 1 down to verse 9. Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign and reigned 50 and 5 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord after the abomination of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he reared up altars for Baal, and he made a grove, as did King Ahab of Israel, and worshipped all the host of heaven, and served them. And he built altars in the house of the Lord, of which the Lord said, In Jerusalem will I put my name. Okay, and he built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. And he built altars for all the host of heaven in the two courts of the house of the Lord. And he made his son pass through the fire. Now, what that means was that he sacrificed his own son, okay, and observed times and used enchantment and dealt with familiar spirits and wizards. He wrought much wickedness in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. And he set a graven image of the grove that he had made in the house, of which the Lord said to David and to Solomon his son, In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all tribes of Israel, will I put my name forever. Neither will I make the feet of Israel move any more out of the land which I gave their fathers, only if they will observe to do according to all that I have commanded them, and according to all the Lord that my servant Moses commanded them. Okay, so verse 9, which is our main text, says, But they hearkened not, and Manasseh seduced them to do more evil than the nations, whom the Lord destroyed before the children of Israel. So in essence, these guys did not hearken to the promises of God, the promises that the Lord made to David and Solomon. They ignored the law of Moses. They were in the assembly when God spoke. These were not people unfamiliar with the voice of the Lord. You need to understand that this was a generation raised in a culture that valued testimony. I'm talking about testimony that recounted the events that happened in the Exodus, the parting of the Red Sea, the miracles in the wilderness, how God drove out the 7 mighty nations to give them the land they now lived in, and so on. Now, despite all that history, despite all that legacy of deliverance and faithfulness, they still did not listen. They still did not pay attention. They had stories, they had scrolls, they had prophets, yet they hardened their hearts. Yet it was said of them that they hearkened not. Now, I was studying that word hearkened in 2 Kings chapter 21 and verse 9, and I discovered that it's the Hebrew verb, okay, samar or shāmar. Pardon the pronunciation, okay, but it actually conveys a sense of careful observation or intentional guarding. It means to hedge about as with thorns. Okay. Now the picture it paints in my head is you having a house, okay, and you going round that house with a rounded fence, and you're not just stopping there, then you go again with a barbed wire, okay, round the rounded fence, you go on top of it with a barbed wire, okay, and then you even get a armed bodyguard, then you can even go in with a CCTV camera, okay. So that's the picture it paints in my head about when you talk about intentional guarding or you talk about careful observation. Now let's read the B part of 2 Kings chapter 21 and verse 9. Okay, it says, "But they hearkened not, and Manasseh seduced them to do more evil than the nations whom the Lord destroyed before the children of Israel." Now, as I began to study that word, to seduce means to cause to stray or reel away. Okay, now the question to ask is, how was Manasseh able to cause the people of God to do evil? He saw that the people of Judah would not listen to the word of the Lord. So he saw the vacuum, okay? He saw how vulnerable the people of Judah were when they did not listen to the word of the Lord. So each time God gives us a command, God gives us an instruction, or He speaks to us, and we do not listen and we do not hearken to the word of the Lord, there is a vacuum there that the enemy sees and he can take advantage of. So all this illustration I gave about having a house and going in with a rounded fence, going in with a barbed wire, okay, just to give an illustration of what it means to hearken, okay, to have a careful observation or to have an intentional guarding, okay. So they did not go in with the word of the Lord like they were hedging about it as with thorns. They did not go in with the word of the Lord like they were trying to secure themselves with the word of the Lord. And so Manasseh saw this vacuum, he saw how vulnerable they were, and he took advantage of it. That was how he was able to seduce them to do evil. So the people's failure to shāmar, okay, opened the door wide for corruption, okay, and seduction. And what the Holy Spirit is trying to help us see here is that He's not just giving us the information, okay, that Manasseh led these people into evil. He's opening our eyes to see why these people were so easily deceived, why they were so easily led into seduction and corruption. So their spiritual negligence made them vulnerable. If they had gathered the word, if they had clung to the covenant, if they had remembered the promises to David and Moses, Manasseh's influence wouldn't have overpowered them. So how do we escape the corruption in this world? Isaiah chapter 59 and verse 19. When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord will raise a standard against him. Now this is a promise of the Lord to us, okay? God always raises a standard before the enemy comes in. So we must immerse ourselves in this standard that the Spirit of the Lord has raised, has lifted up against the enemy. So it's a conscious immersion, it's a conscious warfare, it's a conscious escape. Apostle Paul said to the churches several times, "I will not have you ignorant, I would have you know." Jesus himself said several times in the gospel, okay, take heed, take heed, take heed, take heed, beware of covetousness, take heed, watch and pray, take heed to yourself that you be not deceived. So God doesn't want us, okay, to be caught by surprise by anything. He wants us to be in the know. So we need to consistently separate ourselves from the noise of this world and immerse ourselves in the word and fellowship of the Spirit. Now pay attention. In the days of Manasseh, the standard God raised was His word, His covenant to David and to the fathers, but they rejected it. They would not hearken to it. Today, the standard God has raised is His Spirit in us and the written scriptures. It hasn't changed. This is the standard God has raised for us, and it is more than enough. Revelation 12 and verse 11 says, they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Who is the him, by the way? The accuser of the brethren, that old serpent, the devil. And Jesus says in John chapter 10 and verse 27, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. It's the assurance for me. Jesus is so sure of his own. He's so sure that they will follow him, they will hear his voice, and they will follow him. And this is not because of our strength, but because of his spirit in us. Apostle Peter says in 2 Peter chapter 1 and verse 3, his divine power has given us all things that pertains to life and godliness. Ladies and gentlemen, the Spirit of Christ in you is the life and godliness you need to escape the seduction and corruption in this world. Now let's go back to 2 Kings. After Hezekiah came two generations that fell deeply, Manasseh and Ammon. They did exceedingly evil in the sight of God. They rebuilt the high places Hezekiah tore down. They built altars to Baal. They practiced child sacrifice. They filled Jerusalem with innocent blood. They consulted mediums, sorcerers, and practiced divination. But in the third generation of Hezekiah, in the reign of King Josiah, something shifted. Josiah, a boy of 8 years old, laid hold of the covenant of the Lord to the fathers and turned not aside from it, either to the left or to the right. His biological lineage was corrupted, but he chose to walk in the ways of David. He chose to walk in the ways of the Lord. He embraced the word. He embraced the covenant. He responded to the standard of the Lord. Ladies and gentlemen, the way out of corruption is not complicated. It is to hearken to the Spirit of the Lord. The Lord has already raised the standard. Thank you so much for staying with me on today's episode of Talk Sessions with Chichi. I pray that God establishes this word in your heart and cause the nations of the earth to hear this word. See you next time. Bye.
I'm a force, you can never stop me. Heaven on my side, I got angels with me. 24 hour surveillance.